In what became a month of two halves, the remainder of October was mostly fine. Not a ton out of America stood out to me in this window, and elsewhere it was very much a cream rises to the top situation. Some of the usual suspects continued their great work across the globe, primarily in Japan this time around. We'll get right to it, but as always, a reminder that I haven't seen every single match to have taken place, and the ones I do choose to talk about are based on my personal enjoyment and nothing else. A slight spoiler warning, as I will be talking about match finishes here too. After watching 96 matches spanning 20 promotions, here are a few of my favorites from the rest of October. We're starting out with the big guns. After all the hype and preview tags, it's time to get to brass tacks. After HARASHIMA failed to beat Yuki Ueno back in the spring, he is now challenging the next lineal champion in Shinya Aoki, who is a completely different animal. As expected, so much of what I loved about the preview tags is brought to the forefront here, as so much of this match is dedicated to that incredibly grounded mat work that feels claustrophobic but also massive at the same time. What I mean by that is that the grappling certainly feels cagey, but it's not surgical or precise. It's very rough around the edges and feels like there's almost not enough mat to work with, like these two will send themselves into the ropes at any given moment. Much like the build-up tags mentioned, there's no quarter given in these exchanges. The position of every limb feels important, giving you a ton of moving parts to delve into throughout. There's some nice learned psychology from Aoki, as when he attempts to apply a manji here, immediately stamps out HARASHIMA's hand to prevent him from blocking. This was a much more pronounced sequence last time around. Another thread picked up from the preview tags was HARASHIMA's selling of exhaustion. It's about 4 minutes into the match at this point, and he comes off as completely winded. Aoki seems more assured, but this is by far the closest anyone has kept pace with him in this style, and when it's done at this intensity, it would take a toll on anyone. That toll becomes more and more apparent as the match does start to catch up with HARASHIMA. He leaves the ring first to collect himself before employing something that Ueno tried to in his match with Aoki, being that if you can't beat this guy on the mat, you may as well try to take the mat out of the equation. I think doing so with something like a poison rana is a nice touch, as it's diametrically opposed to anything seen prior and shifts the whole course of the match. Aoki is willing to match this escalation, and this crescendos into an ideal version of the big title match finale. Super violent and desperate, though it doesn't stray from its ideas. HARASHIMA gets more and more angry, swinging for the fences to varying degrees of success, such as booting Aoki square in the forehead at one point, but neither man can put each other away through their best efforts. It takes the challenger's own undoing. I think there's a few ways to interpret this. HARASHIMA takes a moment to gesture to the crowd and gives Aoki that sliver of time and space to put this away, and I'm not sure if it's a case of him losing sight of the mission, or rather trying to engage the crowd to push him across the finish line. No matter what way you slice it, it's a cruel way to lose. It takes every extra second to ensure his shoulders are down, but once they are, they're not coming back up. Aoki's full Nelson is inescapable. This match was great as expected, once again delivering on all the hype from friends of the program and other voices I follow in this space. Some further viewing would come immediately after this, as Shunma Katsumata would cash in his right to challenge, and it's a completely off-the-wall follow-up. It's really one of those things that feels like it could only happen in DDT. I'll have to revisit the round robin between Aoki, Ueno, and HARASHIMA as match of the year time approaches, but you can't go wrong with any of these matches. They're the best that DDT has had to offer in 2024, and from my own perspective, well worth the wait to get around to seeing them. For fans in the West, it was always going to be difficult for the second KTDAN show to follow the success of Abe and Nomura's classic the year before, but for the astronauts themselves, these shows have always been about celebrating what they love. For this second effort, the main event featured the Astros facing off again, this time dropping in two of their influences into the fray. Abe is flanked by Battle Arts founder Yuki Ishikawa, while Nomura is joined by Kazunari Murakami. In the little I've seen of Murakami, he comes off as the most pissed off individual to ever walk the earth, and he brings this energy to the match upon his old rival before the bell even rings. Off the bat, you're met with that stubborn, indignant violence you'd want out of this sort of thing. and there's that added charm of these two beating the hell out of each other while in their 50s. I love the bit that the hosts have to pull this apart just to keep the match from going off the rails. It puts over the old wounds between the two, and also hits those beats of personality that shine throughout in these astronaut matches. It is Murakami that strings the first half of this match together. Abe and Nomura's exchanges are still so good, though through most of this there's that bit of recurring disruption, whether it's Murakami breaking up submissions, extending them by pulling away the bottom rope, or just being a genuine menace to society. It does eventually settle in, and every pairing gets plenty of time. Ishikawa and Nomura especially have some great stuff on the ground before the titular fighting detectives see us off with an extended sprint to the finish. For what it is, I think 25 minutes is a bit too long, but it's all done at such a high level. Last year's main event felt extremely personal, though this one feels very celebratory or joyous, despite everyone in the match committing head trauma onto one another. I can't say that I have the same level of appreciation for this as those who are more familiar with astronauts' influences, but it acts as a nice reminder that there's always more scenes and eras of wrestling to explore. Expanding my own horizons was a goal when starting this channel, and I'm glad there's still shows like this taking place to reinforce that. We go back to Korakuen for Saree's first defense of the red belt against the gaijin who dealt with her handily in the Dreamstar Grand Prix. In both significance and stature, it's her biggest test yet in this fledgling promotion. Sareee was wearing her Aoki influences on her sleeves heading into this, specifically with his matches against Andre, which gives some insight as to how she'd be able to pull this off. She attempts this fairly early with some abbreviated targeting of the arm, though the size advantage is too stark to properly get the hold on. Despite different approaches, there isn't one that works. The longer this goes on, Sareee is more susceptible to Bozilla as a looming threat, and it starts to get away from her. Bozilla provides some nice cutoffs in the ring, though it doesn't feel like she's able to truly take over until they go to the outside where she draws blood. If you've seen anything from this match, it's probably this. I think in a position where you have to put a dominant champion behind the 8-ball, this is an effective way to do so. Good on them for working the wound right away as well, sending the champion into the ring post. Sareee can only get back into this by throwing repeated headbutts, which adds the appropriate desperation into the fold as this gets into big match territory. Considering how the match ends, I think the path to get there is a little convoluted, though blood and violence go a long way for me. Through all the carnage, Sareee is able to finally get in an effective armbar, and I appreciate that she grapevines it with her whole body to further emphasize the size discrepancy. It doesn't exactly mirror Inoki Andre, but you get the idea. Sareee scores the submission victory. While I liked a lot of this, something holds it back from being truly great to me, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I thought it might be the inconsistent work on the arm, though I really didn't have too many issues with how the finish was handled. It could just be a me problem or overshooting expectations, I'm not entirely sure. The point is, it wouldn't be in the video if I didn't think it was worth your time, and maybe you'll get more out of it than I did. More than anything, it's another good Sareee performance in a year full of them. The fourth and final meeting between these teams in 2024 took place in the main event of the Marvelous Show on the 27th. By this point, you have to wonder what they could bring to the table, and quite honestly, it's not a ton of new ideas, but that's fine when the established chemistry is so strong. With Team 200 kg taking the first 3 meetings, it does add that intrigue that if Da Bob can finally get the result. What stood out to me early is how much Yurika Oka anchors this match. I've praised her ability to push the pace in previous videos, but she facilitates a great deal of 200 kg heat early. On top of that, Yu is mostly business here, not leaning into much shtick. Her heavy-handed strikes especially add the emphasis needed to put the challengers in a bad spot. Oka still provides that spark to get her team back in this. I think she actually has the better of the hot tags as well. The absence of an extended Mio Momono segment did have me thinking, eventually we'll get there, and sure enough, her brunt of the work here is really good too. It's the simple idea of never backing down in the face of these obstacles, combined with that endearing babyface energy that carries the rest of the match. But when it's time for Mio to die, my goodness is it brutal. The combination offense sticks out in my mind, but the champions' expertly timed cutoffs really deliver that gut punch to bring things to a screeching halt. It puts into perspective that all the big moments of this match feel rooted in either team's cohesion, be it the champion's destructive force or the challenger's craftiness and timing to get themselves out of a jam. Because of that, I'm not going to wax poetic about an individual Chihiro Hashimoto performance, as any returning viewers might expect, but you can surely trace this back to her fantastic tag work. This late into a rivalry, it feels like both teams have exhausted all options, which makes the finish all the more fitting. Mio Momono utilizes some insane body control to execute a roll-up from a powerbomb position, finally getting the big win. It might not be the most decisive victory, but it certainly feels earned. It's nice to see Mio win something in general, but for all the great work these two teams have put in throughout the year, it's a fitting conclusion to their series. I'm not sure where this stacks up with the previous meetings, but again, it's hard to go wrong with this matchup. And before I go, here are some honorable mentions. Shelton Benjamin vs. Lio Rush from AEW October 16th. It's funny to think back on the apprehension from a lot of AEW fans towards bringing in Shelton, and all it took was a really good showcase match to change that. Shelton Benjamin is still awesome, and Lio Rush was the perfect opponent in this spot. The DPW Super Battle show that aired on the 19th. It's another solid effort from Deadlock with varying degrees of good, if not scratching great. FTR vs. Violence is Forever was match of the night for me, but there's still a level of consistency up and down the card, even if this one may not have reached previous heights in my opinion. Sheamus vs. Ludwig Kaiser from WWE October 28th. Reliable as ever. If you like their previous meetings, you'll get something out of this too. And last but not least, Los Guerreros Laguneros vs. Atlantis Jr., Templario, and Neon from CMLL October 29th. One of the safest bets in wrestling hits again, and when you have the likes of Templario and Neon on the other side, you get some truly dazzling offense when the Technicos come storming back. And that is it from me. If you got this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and for hearing what I had to say. Be sure to do all the obligatory YouTube stuff by liking and subscribing, and find me on socials at OuterStevan. We're nearing the home stretch of 2024 with only 2 months to go, so tune in next time as we get into November.